So this is my beautiful model, Heather. Today we are going to be taking her a lot blonder. We've been doing minis and partials on her for a while, so she has a lot of darkness living back here that we are going to be breaking through and blonding up today. While still making her really, really blonde, we are going to keep her a little bit more dimensional at the roots so she can have a really blended and seamless grow out as usual, because we want longevity in her color. We don't want it to grow out harsh. So I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do that today. We're gonna use a couple different techniques and let's get into it. I'm going to section her off first. We're always going to start in the back because the back is darker than the front, so it takes longer to process. But I'm going to go back to where her head dips and start and section off of there. If you've seen my past videos, you'll know why I do this. And I'm going to section all the way to the middle of the ear and just clip that off, and we're going to focus on that later. So about right the middle of the top of her ear. All right, and then we're gonna start back here, and I'm actually gonna section off from where that meets and meet that point on the other side. And this is going to be its own section. So we're just gonna clip this up out of the way and worry about that later. That is the internal part of the head. So this is where you can focus a little bit less because you do want a little bit more dimension through here. She wants to be really, really blonde. And if we don't focus a lot everywhere in the back, when she pulls her hair forward and takes selfies, she is going to feel really, really dark with all this hair popping forward. So we don't want that. So you really want to focus on all this underneath here and make sure this is really blonde. And then this midsection back here, you can leave a little bit more dimension because your blonde is only as bright as the darkness that it sits next to. So you want some pops there as well. So back here, we always go off of their natural head shape, structure, hairline. Everyone's different, so you're gonna customize it to them. I'm gonna take a foil right off of the way that her hairline naturally goes back here. So I'm just gonna take a slice here. I'm gonna clip this up and out of the way. And then I'm going to weave this. Leave that out for a little bit of dimension. And I'm gonna also brush through this and leave out all those little baby hairs. Go in and just paint my structure first. And then pop my foil in and work on blending this up. Now, even though we've been doing minis and partials on her, I've always been touching the very underneath in the back of her head for the very reason of keeping her really bright and blonde. So she has some blonde pieces back here that I'm not going to be touching with this. So I'll just pop those out of this foil and just work on hitting her natural color. Now, as you can see, I only blended about 3/4 of an inch. Like, there is less than an inch left out here because I really want it to be rooty as well, so it has a lot of blend. You don't want that ponytail popping up and having harsh foil lines. Doesn't look natural. So we're gonna keep doing the same thing, weaving, leaving out, and teasing, back-to-back slices. I'm probably going to do 3 or 4 foils back here on this side before we move to the other side. We want them to meet and touch and kiss at the bottom of the head. Yeah, so this is going to be my last foil on this side, so we're going to do 3 and 3. So this was a little bit thicker of a section, so I just made sure I put a little bit of the lightener down on my board before I put my section on top of it. That ensures that you're kind of like sandwiching the hair with both sides of lightener, and it's really gonna get through there. All right, so we have our 3 down here. We're gonna do the exact same to the other side. So I'm really like blurring up in these foils. You don't see I'm ever hitting and starting a line up there. I'm keeping it very feathered. That's gonna give you a really, really nice blend and ensure that once the root shadow and the gloss fade out, what's left is very blended and continue to grow out and be very organic and natural and never harsh. So here's our last foil here. Now everyone's head shape is different, everyone's hair density is different. So just because I did 3 on the one side doesn't mean I have to do 3 on this side. I just try and keep it the same thickness. All right, and then all of these hairs that we left out, we are now going to lighten. So I'm going to pull them forward and I'm going to tease this up, all those little baby hairs. Now she has a lot of this blonde and I really do not want to overlap here. This is fragile hair, so we're really only going to be focusing on lightening her natural here. But if we were to just do like a wet balayage at the bowl and just be touching this, you're really going to be lifting her natural level to a really warm, like orangey color, and we want to avoid that. So I might be hitting her ends at the bowl with a wet balayage just to brighten them up a tad, but right now we're hitting the midsection. We're worrying about bringing up her blonde ends farther up on the head. So same thing like I did back there in the foil, I'm really feathering up and keeping it very zigzaggy for that natural and organic blend, but I'm not feathering up all the way. So you're gonna have this starting up higher, this starting up lower, and it's gonna look very natural, but getting from her natural color to a little bit of blonde to a little bit of blonde. All right, now we have the top of this section. And I'm first gonna take a triangle section right here and I'm gonna zigzag it, or yeah, zigzag parting. That's the correct word. And I'm going to tease this up and treat this like a tip out like we just did. I really wanna make this blonde, but not super high up. This way, when you bring down the hairs in the foils, it's almost gonna act like a V pattern because you have a higher point here, and this blonde is a little bit lower. So it's kind of like a balayage panel inside a foil. Now when you're doing a blonde, you really want to focus on where you're leaving out the natural dimension, especially when you're adding in a lot more blonde back into the hair like we are today. And so that's where I'm looking at the head and seeing where can we leave out some depth so that it plays well with the blonde without making her seem like she has a lot of dimension left in the hair. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're leaving a lot of dimension in this pocket section of hair so that all the blonde that surrounds it really, really pops. So you got to focus on that when you're looking at the hairs. Can I brighten this, or can I leave this a little bit dark without it overtaking the whole look? So I did another zigzag parting there. And then we're gonna weave this one just like we did on the sides. And this one's gonna go all the way up. Now she has a lot of T's there that can pop back up. So my little trick is taking a comb there, or not a comb, a clip, and clipping that up so that when I'm applying the lightener, it's not going to be pushing that tease back out and into my foil. You want to keep it really clean. These two are going to be my tip out, so I'm going to marry them together and tease this, because this section right here can be left to lay on top of these blondes and it's going to make that really pop. But we still want the blonde ends to creep up higher here. So I tease that, and I'm going to hold it really taut right here, and I'm just going to paint this like I would a balayage piece to really blur and blend this up nice. Again, we're going to be putting some product on the board so that we can sandwich this piece of hair because it's a thick one. And then I also like to go on the hair and go back and forth to make sure I'm coating everything in here. And then this one is a thicker piece, so I'm not going to fold it. I'm going to sandwich it. When you fold a really, really thick section, you're going to end up getting a foil mark where the fold is going to take away the lightener from that section, and you're going to have like a straight line in the hair that never processed. All right, so this piece now is going to lay on top of all of that depth. So this piece is really gonna pop. Because it's in the back section, I still wanna keep it a little bit more dimensional, whereas in the front section, I would probably be turning this into like a baby light sitting on top of the darkness. But I really still want some pops and pockets of depth, so instead I'm going to heavily weave this. We want like wide panel weaves back here. And then we're gonna tease that up as well. So now this one, I'm going to be painting in a V section. So I'm higher on the ends and lower in the middle. All right, so this piece right here, I'm going to break in half so that we have even amounts distributed on either side, and I'm going to worry about those within a tip out later. And now we've hit that midsection. So here is where we're still going to leave some depth. Probably like we're going to leave most amount of depth here without, I would say like this, the half portion back here is where we're going to leave a lot of depth, and then once we get higher up to the head, we're going to be leaving less and less stuff. So you always want to look at what you did last and what's going to be laying on top of that, and that's going to help you visualize what to place. So I'm going to start by just taking a section right here, and we're going to be doing 2 on top of that horizontal one that we just did. So this section is right above the ear. It tends to be a really dark hole here. I don't want it to be a dark hole. So even though this is a really thick section, I'm going to be teasing the heck out of it, and I'm going to be blonding the entire thing. So I'm going to move it over so it's far, like right above her shoulder. I'm kind of holding it parallel with the shoulder. That's going to give us a lot of natural and organic blend. When we move it back here, it's going to be more like a V. So here you could place it horizontal and have it be like a straight line, and when you move it back, it's gonna be side, but I never like to do that. I like to ensure that it's blended, even though I have a little bit of a blend insurance just by the placement. So I'm gonna still feather up, and I am going, you can see my highest point is right here. I am going a little bit lower. I'm already putting in that diagonal angle here, so it's even more dramatic of an angle when you move it back to its natural state. Now over here, she has a really blonde piece here that she didn't have on the other side. I don't want to lighten that because it's just going to cause damage. So I'm actually going to take that out of my section and just let it be. We're only going to focus on this. It's still going to give you the lightness that you want once this is light too, because it's in the correct placement, but it's unnecessary to lighten that part. All right, so looking at this, we just made a heavily saturated mid to end section with a big pocket of depth right here. So if we take a slice on top of this and baby light that would be really beautiful on top because it will have that lightness there. And this is kind of where we want to start a little bit of lightness. So I'm going to take a baby light right on top of both those sections just to start incorporating some higher up blonde. Even with my baby lights, I like to tease and push those little baby hairs out of the way because I want them to be my natural blend, but also whether they are baby hairs or breakage, baby hairs are younger, breakage are fragile. They're both in the kind of the same health state. I don't want to be causing them any unnecessary damage. So by pushing them up out of the way, they can live a little bit longer without having to be put through the ringer of lightener. All right, now we've sort of created a V section back here, and you have a big pocket of depth right here. We have those baby lights on top of there. So I'm going to just go straight across right here and gather that little bit of triangle. And we are going to heavy tease this. And then do another really high up saturated foil. All right, so here we've hit our half portion of that. So we did leave a lot of depth at the root. but we didn't leave any leave outs in those sections. Those are gonna be heavily saturated blonde on the ends. So I'm gonna leave a little bit of dimension right here. I'm gonna do a big zigzag right here because I wanna weave this and leave out some dimension like these. And then this one is going to be painted in a V pattern to give a little bit of drop of depth right in the middle because this is the center point of her head. Split those and marry those in with this, and now we're going to tip these out. These, because they are the center portion of depth, I'm going to start my tip out really low, my T's really low, and I'm going to tip them out really low as well. So I'm not going to be going to the midsection of the hair like we've been doing. I'm going to go really low. Now a little trick too, because she is still blonde there. I mean, it definitely needs to be in a foil to lift up because it's pretty of a brassy orangey blonde. I didn't heavily saturate this section. You can still see through it, so it's going to lift a little bit slower than it's something that's heavily saturated. So it's going to lift slower than all the rest of the foils. Little trick, if you still need that kick of having the highlight in a foil versus an open air or a wet balayage, but it doesn't need as much of a kick as like her natural hair in a foil, just don't saturate it as heavily and it'll work evenly. All right, so I just took a slice on top of this. I want to see how this is gonna naturally sit. So that's right where her head dips back. So I usually like to leave a lot of depth there. However, we already just left a lot of depth in this piece. We did a V section. So I feel like I'm gonna do the opposite with this one. This one was a V, I'm gonna do a point. So I leave a little bit more depth here. This goes a little bit higher, but it's still a depth piece and not a full highlight. You can see last time I did a V in this section, there's a high point here and a high point there. So having this be a little bit blonder is really gonna work well in blonding her up. Now I'm gonna go through and I'm going to weave out those really long pieces because they don't really need to be touched. And we're just gonna focus on this. So if we're looking at the way that it was sitting before, even if we were to paint this like a point, we'd be painting right here, but it wouldn't be the middle of her head. This is the middle of her head. So we're painting the point right here and then we're going down here. On top of that last section, we are going to be doing a baby light. All right, so I put a wide foil in here now so I can get this whole section in one foil. And I'm still just going to brush out those little baby hairs. And now we're gonna lighten this as high up as you can go with it still being blended. All right, so even though I fold my foils really tight on the ends, that's to lock them in, you can see I still keep everything very puffy here. That's to ensure that you're not gonna get a folded crease in your lightener. So be conscious that you're not like going through and sealing this down. That's how you're not only going to get a crease down here, but you're also going to push all the lightener up and you're going to get bleed marks. All right, so this is the top portion that all of this is going to sit on top of. She's gonna be really blonde up here. So if I really blonde this portion, it's gonna be blonde on top of blonde and it's gonna be too harsh. So this last section up here, this little part is where I still want to leave a big pocket of depth so that all of this can sit on top of that and work off of it. So this is probably thick enough for 2 sections, so I'm gonna be doing these differently. So we're gonna be taking one section first. I'm just gonna take a slice, nothing too fancy. And this, I'm just gonna tip out. So we're gonna tease this all the way up. She is pretty blonde, so I'm not even gonna be putting this in the foil. I'm just gonna be popping it open air to lighten up a little bit. Now I mixed some clay lightener in with my regular lightener so it has this cast so I can do this as I'm working through it. Last section up here we are going to weave. And I'm gonna do a tinier weave, not a wide weave, more of like an angel hair weave versus linguine weave. And tease that up there, and I'm gonna take another foil. And I'm still going higher up here, but I'm leaving out a lot more depth. Because it's higher on the head, your highlight is going to sit higher to this, closer to the skull. All right, the back is done. Now we move on to the sides. I always, when I move to the side, if they have a side part, which she has a side part, I start on the thickest side of the head because it's going to take me a little bit longer to work through than the other side. So it's going to start evening out the processing. So if you've seen my past videos, you know I always like to part where the recession in her hairline is. So we're going to just take a section there, all the way back, and clip this out of the way and worry about that later. We're gonna start down here. She likes to be brighter around the face, so we're going to keep that same thing. Now with this technique, you could do this exact technique on someone and change up your placement around the face to change it up a little bit according to how they like it around their face. So customize it as you will. I'm gonna take a slice right off of the way her hairline naturally goes right here. That's how our direction is going to go for the side of the head. So I'm gonna pull out those little baby hairs in this piece. We're gonna pop a foil on there and we're gonna lighten all of this. Going to the scalp with this. We really want it to be bright. And then I am going to take her money piece and take it all the way back to where her recession kind of dips back there. So I'm gonna keep going like this pattern, but stop there. So I'm gonna be taking another slice, and it's gonna be like a baby slice because you're gonna be slicing this again, and we're leaving out those hairs. That's gonna be our natural depth so that the blonde really pops, but also doesn't look as harsh and has that natural depth for blend as it grows out. So it doesn't just look like lines growing out on the side of her head. As I'm doing this, I'm gonna be pivoting just a little bit because I really wanna be, I'm at the start of her ear right here. I really want that to be my meeting point for all of these hairs. That way we're not taking this section back too far and making it really blonde right there where it doesn't need to be. We kind of want to leave a little bit of pocket of depth right there. When she wears her hair up, everything's gonna be pulled back this way. If you make it really blonde here, she's gonna have like this chunk of blonde going back in her ponytail. And we don't want that. We almost want this to be really depth. Now if you mix a little bit of clay into your lightener, like I did, it's going to really help the consistency of your lightener for doing these really close to the scalp baby lights, so that your lightener doesn't bleed or expand. Now, like I said before too, don't worry about counting how many foils you're doing for here, especially for like your money piece. If you're counting your foils and she has a different amount of density on the other side of her head, and you're placing, let's say 10 foils here and 10 foils there, it's gonna look a lot thicker on the other side because she has less hair there and you're going through a lot more. So instead of that, you're gonna be using stationary points on the head. Like I said, the top of her ear where that connects to her scalp is where I am pivoting from. And I'm connecting that to the recession part here. All right, so this is gonna be my last piece here because that's right where the recession dips. I'm gonna weave this one because it is my last section and because I'm only working off right in the recession. And then when you're doing these vertical sections on the side, the foil tends to slip as you're working. That's why I like to apply my foils the way I do with my comb, so I can flip it up, go back here and just tuck that section and keep it nice and neat, clean again. All right, now we're working on all of this. This is again similar to the back where you do want a lot of depth living, so we're gonna treat this section different than we're gonna be treating the top. However, because she wants to be super, super blonde, we really do need a heavily blonde here. So this first section here, I'm going to take to the scalp because I want this to still be blonde like her money piece and like the underneath here, so that when she wears it up, she doesn't have any dark streaks popping through there and she doesn't look like a skunk. You want to keep it all blonde. So I just took a slice and we're just gonna lighten this whole thing. Treat it like the foils we just did. All right, so the money piece on the sides is done. Now we can get into the internal portion of the hair. So I'm going to take about 1/2 inch section. And I'm going to take a baby light right on top of this section. I'm gonna lighten this, push up all those baby hairs. Lift them out of the way and take this to the scalp. This is going to be our blonde pops coming through here, and because we're doing horizontal sections, they're really going to be a statement. Whereas if we were to do these vertical sections, we did them really close together because you need a lot of vertical sections really close in order to make the same pop that this essentially would make. Now I'm gonna clip this up out of the way, and this is going to be a tip out. We're gonna tease this. And we're gonna be lightening the mids to ends. Now, if you catch my drift here, we're starting up higher and going lower. We're doing a diagonal back section. We're gonna be doing that all the way up. This ensures that the highest point of blonde is towards her face, and the closer you get to the back, the more depth that naturally lives. That's the way that her hair is naturally gonna be lightened by the sun, so I wanna mimic that. We're gonna begin continuing this pattern throughout this entire internal section here. So taking a 1/2 inch section. A baby light right on top of that. Now this one has a lot of blonde living there, so instead of putting this tip out in a foil, I'm just going to open air process this one. And I'm not even going to paint all the way down because those ends are a little fragile, so if they need to be hit by something, we'll wet balayage them at the bowl. Otherwise, they might only just need a toner to freshen them up. These blonde pieces that I'm picking out, I'm going to tip out open air like I did that one, but I'm going to leave them out and I'll tip them out with the others later. Right now I'm just going to be putting this in a foil because this is her natural level and that needs to be in a foil to process. Right, again, we're picking out these blondes. We're getting higher up on her head to where we've been doing minis and partials on her. So closer up, the more conscious I'm being because we're hitting those previous highlights we've done. And don't worry about leaving those out ruining your overall look. They're still blonde. Right now our focus is really blonding her up. So even if this hits a little bit lower than what it's sitting next to, it's all going to work out beautifully. When I'm painting these tip outs too, that I'm going higher on some, lower on others. That ensures a really nice and organic blend. If you try and hit the same midpoint every time, even though they're sitting on different levels of the head, you're still going to start to see a little bit of a line there. I'm not wanting to push up all of these because they are shorter hairs, just naturally, as hairs are in the recession. And if I push them all up, she's gonna have a dark hole there. All right, and that is the side. We are now going to do the same thing to the other side, and we're gonna merge the top two to get pieces together and create a Mohawk section. Okay, so we finished the sides. We're gonna work on this Mohawk section. Now, I am not going to be doing this like a Mohawk the entire way. I'm just going to be starting it like one so we can make the sides act, or the top act like we did on the sides. I'm just gonna start with a slice. Slice. Now you can see her hairline. Everyone's hairline is different. She has a little bit of a dip here. So I'm just gonna keep working in straight horizontal, but I can't leave out depth here. Otherwise her money piece will just be blonde here and she'll have darkness there. So I have to be conscious of when I hit that point as well. Doing a back-to-back slice here so we can have a bold money piece. Now still we're being conscious of the way the hairline naturally is. With our next slice here, we're still not hitting this part of her head yet, but I don't want to keep doing slices here and making this really thick, and this will just be a baby money piece. So I'm gonna already start my sectioning here by slicing through this and leaving that out like we did on the sides, so that this pattern can already get started. All right, now we're starting to hit the left side. So with this slice, I'm going to pick this up and then section that in half. I should have about 1 or 2 more sections until we meet the entire right head of the dip. Now that we've gotten this far, I can see that her Mohawk section is a little too wide for the foil, moving farther back. So I am going to break that up by taking a little bit on each side higher and continuing what we did on the sides just to even that out. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working back, but I'm going to be taking thicker sections right now. Maybe taking like, let's see, here. If this is the thickness of one baby light, this is the thickness of two that I'm leaving out. And the way you want to think about this is we're wanting the most impact, the most collection of blonde around her face. And as the farther away from the face we get, the more depth we leave out and the less blonde we're putting in. But we still want it to be really impactful and very blonde. So you can see I'm not really leaving out a ton, but I'm leaving out enough for there to be depth, and I'm going to continuously leave out more and more the farther back I get. Start the depth portion of her roots. So still the same that we just did, just a tiny bit thicker, like a hair thicker. And take that baby light, pop it in the foil, push out those baby hairs, and now instead of going all the way to the scalp, I'm going to feather it up. And that's going to leave you a little bit varying depth at the root. Now to break it up though, because I don't want this to start looking stripy, which it can be when you go working off the Mohawk, I'm going to take a zigzag section right here. So zigzag parting. About the same width that we've been doing. And I'm going to leave this and then tease this. So we're still leaving depth at the root, but I'm bringing in a little bit more blonde by throwing this in there. And it's going to break up that pattern that we've been doing so it doesn't start looking cookie cutter and it looks very organic. I usually like to end on a weave so that two sections will merge together very organically. And I will never do the same pattern twice on someone. I'll never do it the same on someone else. So you kind of see how I bounce around and customize it to someone. But that's it for our Mohawk right now. We're gonna see where her hair naturally parts and part it back to work off of her part for the rest of the sections. We're going to be doing this horizontal again. So we really want to make sure we're merging these two together. So here I'm going to take a zigzag section because I want this to make an impact while still leaving depth. Pick those points up and leave that out. Tease this. And that's going to be our merging foil for all of the sections that are meeting here. I'm also going to apply this higher again towards the face and lower towards the back. And I'm gonna move this towards the front because we're gonna be tipping those out. Now on top of this, I'm gonna take a slice, and this is laying on top of that zigzag pattern. So it already has those natural pockets of depth. So I'm just gonna take a baby light right on top of this and leave that out for depth. Now for this foil, I'm going to be going as close to the scalp as possible. Because again, we left out the depth underneath. This is going to sit on top, so it's going to be a pop. So you want it to be a high of foil. You can see that when I tease that, a lot of her natural depth from the middle is getting pushed up. So we don't have a lot. I probably teased her the last time I saw her a month and a half, 2 months ago, and tipped this out. So it is still pretty blonde. So I am just going to open air touch this. It's not going to sit in a foil. It doesn't have enough depth in there for the necessary need to do it. All right, I'm gonna do one last zigzag here because of the thickness of this section. It could use another pocket. So we zigzagged that. I'm going to do thick wide weaves here for an impact of blonde, and we're gonna leave this out. Tease out the baby hairs. Now you never want to end your section, especially at the top of the head, with a fettuccine weave. You want to always end with either a spaghetti or a baby, or an angel hair, I mean. That's going to give you the most blend. Whereas fettuccine or linguine gives you a lot of impact. But you have to make sure you put it in a place where everything around it is blended so that it makes it very blended. This is so bright, so I'm just gonna leave this out and we're gonna touch all of those back at the bowl with a wet balayage later because they really only need a little bit of a kick. All right, so we just had a weave section, so again, we're gonna do a slice right on top of that. And the higher up I'm getting, the less dense my sectioning is as well. And I'm gonna take a baby light and leave out this depth. So up here, we have about just under an inch section left. These are going to be pretty much what we did for the money piece. We're going to be doing back-to-back baby lights, leaving out a baby light in between. Because I really want these to be an impact. gonna keep that same sectioning in mind for this side, but adjust accordingly to the density of the hair. Side part, and she had, of course, less density on this side from that. We are only doing one chunky weave and one zigzag parting on this side before we hit the top baby lights. I still want her to get a lot of longevity out of her root shadow and her color. So I'm going to be dragging it down farther in the back than I am around her face to give it that natural, organic, like teardrop look. So right now I'm dragging it down about 1 inch to create that shadow up here. So this section that I have right now is what was part of the front section when we coiled, and now I've hit the back section. So I'm going to switch up my positioning and do vertical to hit underneath here. And Heather, maybe look down for me. Perfect. Now we kept it very teased and rooty in the back, so there really isn't too much to hit back here. The root shadow is more so for your foil placements that we did on the side and the front, just to marry everything together. But I still want to be touching and hitting back here just to be safe. I really like using vertical sections back here because it really helps you lay down a lot of groundwork in a short amount of time, and it also avoids making it all stop at the same spot and then getting those kind of lines with your root shadow versus a really blended root shadow. And then I like to brush through that to make sure it blends and melts into the hair. And now we're gonna hit the sides. And then for the sides, I'm actually going to section off about 1 inch around her hairline. We're not even going to touch that. And I want to create that like teardrop effect. So I'm again doing diagonal back. And even when I'm placing it too, I make sure that the part here above the root, I'm doing almost like a triangle as well. I'm bringing it out farther down here than I am, and I'm going closer up towards her part. Make sure that's really blended in. Trust your formula and you'll never be scared to brush through and drag that down a little bit. do a wet balayage while that sits. So I'm gonna start in the back. And this was where she was really dark underneath, so I did a lot of tip outs back here, so I'm not even gonna touch this because that's all fresh blonde. So up here is where we're really gonna focus here on the sides. You don't want to drag this up too far that you're hitting any of her natural hair color. You really just want to be kissing on the blonde. And if you do make a mistake and drag it up too far, you can just wipe that out and it's gone. And then the top sections were where we left out a lot because they were previously latent the last time we did our hair, and I didn't want to hit them in the foil or tip them out. So now I'm going to make sure I am going a little bit higher up here since they weren't touched today yet. And then the pieces we left out around her face, I'm just touching those ends. And I'm going to save my root melts, and I'm going to hit that later with the gloss. All right, so we're going to let this sit and finish processing. All right, we're just going to purple shampoo the fresh ends real quick. I always like to pre-tone before glossing. It helps that your gloss isn't doing too much work and you can mix your gloss exactly for what you're wanting to see versus correcting plus your end result. This kind of helps a little bit of the correcting step. I didn't root shadow the inch around her face because I really like how that is looking, and she really wants a bold money piece, so it's going to work wonderfully there. And then I applied the gloss everywhere except, again, that inch around her face, and I'm going to apply that for the last 5 minutes of processing. So this is the after of it straight. She's a lot blonder, beautiful. We are still very dimensional and lived in, but it looks so natural and still a really, really blonde statement. And you can see that depth that we left back here, but there's still a lot of blended blonde coming in through there to give you this bright blonde statement. We're gonna curl it and I'll show you the finished result. Here is the after curled. So beautiful, blended and dimensional. We're obsessed.
Obsessed.
Yes. So that was the blonde transformation. Follow, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and follow my other social links. Thanks for joining.